good quality management documentation is essential for effective quality management system, and it can be more than just logs and paperwork. I'm your host, Brian Wagner. In this episode of the Engineering Quality Control Podcast, I'll be talking with LaKeeVia Jackson, Quality Manager at Mortenson, about the best practices for quality management and documentation. So let's jump right in. So now I'd like to welcome our guest for today, LaKeeVia Jackson from Mortenson. LaKeeVia, welcome to the Engineering Quality Control Podcast.
Hi, thank you, Brian, for having me.
So could you just get started by maybe telling our audience a little bit about yourself and what you do on a daily basis?
All right. My name's LaKeeVia. I'm originally from Prince George's County, Maryland. I'm a quality manager, and what my day-to-day typically is that I'm coordinating a lot with a variety of trade partners, what we like to say we're more like contractors and designers, kind of to make sure that we are developing a product and constructing the product to meet the design specifications, or pretty much just making sure that it is the quality that the end user is looking for. And a lot of times those quality parameters are either in industry standards or they may be in the actual scope of the project.
So I want to dive in a little bit more to that stuff, but before we do, you're involved in many professional associations and were actually selected in 2014 as the Black Engineer of the Year Student Leader Award recipient. Can you tell us about how that experience has helped your career?
Yeah, so that experience was kind of based on, my leadership and or volunteer roles that I participated in college, and it really gave me the experience to actually deal with a variety of personalities. It taught me a lot about conflict management, and it also gave me opportunities to generate my management style before actually getting into the working world. It kind of gave me my confidence or made me feel comfortable once I was able to step into kind of corporate America. And then also one of the things that a lot of those experiences did for me was it's really sometimes a challenge to like really motivate volunteers. So motivating volunteers, like people who aren't getting paid to do something, to actually do things and do it well, was a skill that it kind of that I acquired, that it translated very well into the working world. We're all kind of motivated by our paychecks or fulfillment of the work.
That's great, and that's a great accomplishment. So I commend you for that. So let's get into a little bit of what you're doing to be successful with quality management in your day-to-day work. You said you're dealing with a lot of different entities and different things, trying to make that idea into something real, right? So what purpose or benefits do you believe in as far as maybe like logs or checklists and that other, like, what quality management documentation are you doing to help you be successful?
So I use a lot of logs. I typically use logs to track material, and as far as like what the lead time is of that material, when the material is needed on site. Sometimes the submittal has to be reviewed by multiple entities. It might need to be reviewed by the authority, AHJ, the authority having jurisdiction. So those logs help me be able to really know what are the different steps that I need to kind of get through in order to even produce or procure kind of any of our different products or materials or different systems that we have to install.
Now, did you make those logs, or are you using like a technology to do that?
So there are different technologies. My company has different like technologies and different systems that they, typically have us use to kind of generate different logs. And most companies do have different ways that they want you to manage their quality management process, and it may be a technology or it may be as simple as an Excel sheet.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of power to Excel, but sometimes it can be too complicated, I think. And sometimes the technologies can simplify things, but then they don't necessarily do 100% of what you're trying to do. So I like to use Excel, but I also see the benefit of some of those unique technologies. Um, I have some notes here about like submittal registers and material tracking. What are some other important um, things that you like to include in those logs?
Well, for the submittal register, the biggest thing that I like to include is if it needs to be reviewed by more than one person, because that can be, that's a hurdle that you have to get through before you can even fabricate and deliver the material. So sometimes like an average review time could be 7 or 14 days. So now if it has to be reviewed by, multiple entities and they want to review it either concurrently or after one another or in succession form, then that'll can stretch out to a point where you might have like a 30-day review period, and that's if you submitted everything correctly the first time. If you didn't submit something correctly the first time, or something was missed, or they have comments, or they're revising and resubmit it, then you have to start that whole process over, and that could ultimately delay your project. So it's one of those things that I like to figure out which documents require multiple reviews, because I want to make sure that my project team is aware of that, and that that we're just prepared for that as far as like scheduling the material as needed.
Right. So in the design phase, I'm thinking what I deal with on a scheduling basis. So through the design process, we're kind of forecasting when we'll be finished. In this scenario, you're kind of working backwards to hit a milestone. How many weeks, how many days, how many hurdles do I need to put, and how does that align going backwards? So I just think it's a different perspective, and I think it's a great one to have. And I'm sure that
Yeah.
every time that you miss that deadline, you add a couple more days on that next job, right?
Yeah, or it could delay someone else installing if you have a following contractor, like for example, if you have like you need to install your carpet and you need your door frame there, and in order for you to do your transition strip, and something's delayed, it's like now I have to come back and install the transition slip, or install the piece of carpet tile. So sometimes it can make it complicated for coordinating, because now I might have missed a window with one contractor, and I now have to reschedule them, and they might have a 4 to 5 week, backlog, and when they can have, manpower on site. So it's really important to be able to coordinate those, because it could have a trickle down effect.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that just rely on other things, either purposefully or unintentionally. So as you think about designing and improving these documents, what are things that you are doing when you implement new ones or apply them to your organization?
Well, some of the things that I do is I kind of try to make sure that I fully understand what the original scope of work is, because sometimes when you're in a design process, you can kind of either miss some of the design intent that was, interpreted in the actual scope of work, and you might have to get like creative, especially in like a design build project. You might have to kind of get really like creative and working very closely with the architect or architects and engineers, based on what's available. Or you might have some things with existing conditions. So a lot of times, you might need to, do virtual design and construction, which you might need to get a BIM model to actually kind of see some of these things and see some of the complexities that you wouldn't see in 2D.
So as you mentioned BIM and the virtual design construction, or VDC, as I've also heard it called, what are some of the steps that you're taking in that early phases to review the drawings and the specifications in a 3D or in a model scenario that help you be successful in the long term? and with the implementation?
I think the biggest thing is to make sure that things are coordinated properly between the different disciplines. Um, and that's essential. Like an example, your furniture is coordinated with your electrical power, because you don't want to have your desk your desk and the cord for your laptop is won't reach to the nearest outlet. So that's just things that you just have to think of in a logical standpoint, because sometimes it's really like common sense. A lot of times we put a lot of a theory, and it's just like, no, seriously, like how do you expect me to actually physically walk up and plug in my laptop when the outlet is all the way across the room? that
Right.
that that's something that I find very, very interesting when I'm like writing RFIs about and stuff like that.
Yeah, because they had to put one on the wall, but they didn't necessarily think about where on the wall, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So I'll tell you a short, funny story about that is when my dad built his house, he said he never wanted to use an extension cord in his kitchen.
Mhm.
So, like on the long wall where you might have normally two outlets, I think he has
Mhm.
five.
Mm.
And the sheetrock people were quite upset when they came
Mhm.
in and saw all of the outlets in the kitchen. And now he built his house almost 40 years ago, and he has never used an extension cord yet because there's plenty of outlets and he knows exactly where they all are.
Something else I do is I think about the stakeholders, the different variety of stakeholders as far as like the end users. Because you might have a variety of end users, or you might have a space that's like a collaborative space. So like that's something that you also have to make sure that they all knew that they all might have had conflicting interests, and then it was like noted in like the scope of work documents. So sometimes you have to like coordinate with the stakeholders to like really figure out what they want, or if they need to like compromise on what they want if it's multiple stakeholders. So that's something that I also think about when reviewing, and then sometimes I think about contract documents. When I say contract documents, sometimes I was at a conference once and they said like capital C, capital D contract documents, which is more so like the actual contract with the owner and the actual scope of work, um, or maybe like surveys that they've given out, or like different sketches or drawings. And that sometimes, what people just think contract documents are just the specifications and the drawings, but sometimes it could be a lot of different other things that the client gave when you actually like bid to do the job.
Right, because they're the ones that have to deal with it when it's all said and done, right?
Hmm.
So, do you guys take a step maybe in between the virtual world and the modeling world before you might like just completely build something, especially if there's some questions about how something might fit together or work, like
Well,
mock-ups or
the VDC effort is through the entire life cycle. So you'll do BIM modeling through the design phase of it, as well as BIM coordination in the construction phase of it, and then also you'll use the BIM virtual design construction, like the BIM software, to do quality checks, like to verify that things are installed in the proper heights and that they went in the proper order, and that because sometimes a contractor will be like, well, I got to this space first, so I installed it. Too bad, and we'll have to say, well, let's pull up the model and figure out who actually was, supposed to go first. And then sometimes people have to reinstall their, material, or like shift it, because a lot of times, like if we do that, then we have rework. We want to reduce the number of rework. Um, so that's just something that the BIM model kind of help reduce the amount of rework, and just making sure that, the foreman or the people actually like boots on the ground have like the access and training to the stuff, because now some of the BIM software, you can use it on the iPad or your iPhone. So just making sure that you're like training individuals to see it, and once you kind of train them to use it, like it really helps eliminate a lot of conflicts between different trades in the field.
Do you use mock-ups or other things to help with that transitional period?
Yes, mock-ups are really good about seeing if if it really works because we've looked at it in 2D, it worked. We looked at it in 3D, it worked. Now, when we actually try to go build it, does it work? So a lot of times, you use that to kind of see that, or even a test to see if the product can withstand what the intent was, or if you're wanting to kind of go, you know, see different ways of what it might look like. And a mock-up could be, it could be like mock-up can be different sizes. It can be like a real huge mock-up that's like a little mini building, or it could be just something that is like like a two by two, just kind of cut out. Because I know I did one on like a little mini roof mock-up. So we just kind of did that in a little small scale. So that was kind of cool to do that. But mock-ups are really good also for like workmanship. I think my favorite thing about mock-ups that sometimes people might not always think about is when you have changes in personnel. It's really good once you do your safety orientation and say, okay, here, let's have a quality orientation and let's go look at all the mock-ups that pertain to your scope of work and then see if you have any questions or if we need to refer back to like the mock-up report where we've documented each step of the installation just to make sure that you understand this because sometimes you projects it could be one little thing that's different on a project than all the other projects and sometimes people are coming to the project thinking like oh I always do it this way. I always say the six most expensive words in business is that's what we've always done. So that's one of those things where I'm like okay, after reviewing all these mock-ups, do you have any questions or is this something, that you've done on your previous project? And most of the time I'll discover that something was kind of like slightly different or like the foreman or the superintendent or whatever the worker or whatever the installing tradesperson is doing the work, they'll be like, oh, okay. And then it'll definitely expedite, like the process to make sure that the work is installed safely and, with quality. So I find the mock-ups to be very beneficial from the product, from proving that the product is the looks of quality as well as just making sure you work out the kinks in the workmanship.
I think I mean, you're basically establishing the expectations in a very small scale or a relative scale to what you expect those contractors, those subs to do. And I'm sure that the owner and the end user are somewhere involved in that mock-up. And one of the recurring themes that I've heard with several of our guests is to have successful quality management is a lot of the time it is just the communication and establishing those expectations and avoiding the assumptions as much as possible because like you said one contractor's normal way of doing it isn't the way that you expect it to be done maybe in this circumstance.
Yeah, and then it's also sets the expectation ahead of punch lists. When like if you have rooms that are repetitive, let's say you have like like an office building, you're gonna have all the same offices, set up, or you might have five different styles of offices. You have all the bathrooms that might look the same and have all the same material. They just might be smaller or larger. So it's good to just say, okay, let's do one bathroom or let's do one office and then kind of set the standard or kind of get a feel for what the end user or inspector is expecting ahead of like your final punch list. So that'll help you achieve zero punch list more so towards or a relatively low number of punch list items when you get to the end of the project when you do those many kind of like milestone mock-up kind of areas.
I think that's great advice. So we have listeners of all ages, um, some that are early in their career, some that are more well-established professionals, and they could be considering a change. They could be considering how they can do better in their job. But what suggestions would you have for someone who is considering a career similar to yours with this kind of emphasis?
Um, well, Well, for one, it just depends on where you are. With entry level, I would say get involved in different student organizations or young professional organizations if you're kind of about to graduate or a recent graduate. I would do that, and then also you can attend different career fairs um, to get exposure because a lot of companies have the quality management position. It can in construction more so. I know every company I've worked with or anybody that that I know of different companies, they all have quality manager positions. It might not be in every group in the company, but they might have one or two in the company. Um, so I just feel like this you just have to ask, do you have a quality manager position? As far as experienced professionals, um, people that are already in the field, I think the referrals is kind of the best way to kind of go about that, or just kind of connecting with different companies and also going to career fairs and different organization events. But I think as far as like experienced professionals, I think the best way to go is probably just referrals and just interacting with people because most programs have referral initiatives. I know Mortenson does. So if anyone is interested in joining Mortenson, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and we can see if Mortenson's the right fit for you.
It's great advice. I think every conference that I've ever went to, every event, I feel like I do walk away with some other perspective that may seem very irrelevant. And at some point, it just comes back to be something that, oh, that's what they were talking about. Or I remember this one person told me about this thing. And it's just gathering that information and gathering that experience. And we like to have, with every episode, what we call the power of experience segment, something that you maybe wish you knew earlier in your career or that you wish somebody would have told you before. This is your opportunity to share that information, that idea, some piece of advice for our listeners.
I would say that understanding the different roles of the people around you, like when you're in an organization, I think just getting that exposure and just asking certain questions, it'll really kind of open up, your mind or your opportunity, your exposure to different opportunities by just asking different questions of people and then just kind of taking the opportunity of just trying different things. Because I know me, I've rotated through a different bunch of positions where I was able to still do quality work and I might have had like my job position was one thing, but I might have did a variety of different had different titles on different projects or different roles and responsibility on projects that just gave me different exposure and experience that if I would have said, oh well that's not in my wheelhouse or oh that doesn't really align with my job description, it wouldn't have given me a well-rounded construction experience that I have. So I would say, kind of step out your comfort zone and don't kind of limit yourself or don't tell yourself no. Just go out there and try, try to do something and see if it sticks.
I think that's great advice. You mentioned connecting with you on LinkedIn. Is that the best way to connect with you? If somebody would want to get in touch with you and learn more about what you're doing?
Yes, sir. That's it is.
So with that, I want to be courteous of your time. I don't have any more questions. Do you have any other final thoughts?
No, I just want to make sure everyone has a quality day.
So thank you very much, and I appreciate your time.
All right, thank you.
Please remember that you can find the show notes for this episode and all episodes at engineeringqualitycontrol.com. There you'll find a summary of the points that we've discussed, along with any links to resources and websites, including a link to LaKeeVia's LinkedIn page. Until next time, friends, I wish you the best in all of your engineering endeavors.